So now we're going to go from looking at taxes and calculation with taxes and tax rates to looking at your investment interests. Okay, simple interest, is a very basic calculation with just multiplication involved. But simple interest, just to give you an idea of what interest is in general, is the amount that a financial institution like a bank will pay you for allowing them to use your money. Okay, so basically, in the case where you may have a savings account um, or a certificate of deposit at a bank, a CD, you deposit your money at that bank. They pay you a certain percentage of that money in order for them to keep it, and then they turn around and lend it out to other people. Um, their lending process brings them in more interest than what they pay you, so they make a benefit, they make a profit in the end. But it benefits you because you still make some money in um, you know in the interest from allowing them to use your money. Okay, so it's all um, a case of depositing, loaning, and who's making interest there. So anyway, the idea is if you deposit your money into a financial institution, they pay you interest. If you were to take out a loan, like a car loan, you don't have enough money to pay for a car, so you take out a loan, then you pay them interest. Okay. Now the amount that you pay in a loan is always going to be greater than the amount that they pay in interest on a deposit. Okay. So that's just the overall idea of interest in a nutshell, kind of. Now, simple interest is a basic one operation calculation, just multiplying. We'll talk more about other forms of interest in the next section. But simple interest is just you take the principal, so I is the interest, you take the principal is the amount that you deposit or withdraw depending upon the type of transaction. So the principal, if you were to deposit $2,000 into a bank, that's the principal. Okay, the interest is calculated based upon that amount and a predetermined rate. Maybe you're earning 1% interest. The rate is always used as a decimal in the calculation, and usually we talk about annual rates. And just assume it's going to be an annual rate or a yearly rate unless otherwise stated. Okay, so if it specifically says this is a monthly rate, then use months instead, but typically it's going to be an annual rate. With an annual rate, the T is represented by time, or time is represented by T, I should say, and the time is in units of years. It's going to match the type of rate. So if you had an annual rate, it's going to be in years. If it was a monthly rate, you would have months here, but that's very rare. We're not going to see that very often, if at all, in this course. Generally, we're working with years, again, unless otherwise stated, okay? But always you want to match the units on the rate and the time, okay? So if it's an annual rate, use years. If it's a monthly rate, use months, okay? So those are the main parts of the formula. And basically the idea is this: you multiply these things together, which kind of makes sense. If you're looking at an interest rate or a percentages of a principal, well, the word of represents multiplication. To calculate a percent of something, you always multiply those two values together. So that's where the PR part of this comes from. The T represents the number of years. So if you were to invest $2,000 for a period of 5 years, well, you calculate the interest for 1 year, and the interest for the second year and the third year, and you add them all up, that's 5 of the same value. So you multiply it by 5, right? 5 years, it's 5 times a single year's worth of interest. And so that's why you multiply by that. So it's principal times rate times time equals the interest, okay? So just a very basic calculation. Let's say you were to invest as a principal $2,000 into some sort of savings account, and let's say you were earning maybe at a rate of 1.5%. Now that's actually a reasonably high interest rate for most savings accounts, but we'll go with it, just trying to use some numbers that work out well. Most of the time your rates are going to be more like 1/4%, like 0.25% or something, but or maybe 0.5%, but we'll go with this. And then let's say you went with a 5-year period, so T is 5 years. So you leave that money in for 5 years and see how much interest you earned. Okay, so we're just going to go through that calculation. Interest is equal to the principal, which is 2,000, multiplied by the interest rate turned into a decimal. And again, you've got to move the decimal point 2 places left, so it's 0.015 times 5. Now, of course, you could do this calculation by hand. You could do that on your calculator. What's nice about the numbers I chose, and I didn't actually pre-plan this, but 2,000 times 5 is 10,000. And if you multiply any decimal by 10,000, you move the decimal point 4 places to the right. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, you end up with $150. So on a $2,000 investment at 1.5% annual interest over a 5-year period, you make $150. Not too bad. Okay, so now let's change this up a little bit and look at a situation where the time is not given in years, because this is often going to happen, where maybe you have you're depositing into a certificate of deposit, a CD, and a lot of times CDs are not in years, they're measured in months, like an 18-month CD or something like that. And so let's say you did that, you had an 18-month certificate of deposit, which certificate of deposits basically have a higher interest rate, but you're penalized if you withdraw your money during the period of time. So if you have an 18-month CD, you put your money in, and the bank basically has a guarantee from you that you're not going to touch it for 18 months. That allows them to have a little bit more security in when they loan that money out, that they won't be losing parts of it because you want it back. Okay, so they can pay you a little higher interest rate to entice you to do that. So that's the 18-month CD. And let's say you had I don't know, I'm making something up here, a 2.3% annual interest. Okay, and we're going to use the simple interest formula for this. And you wanted to put in, let's go $5,500, $5,500. Okay, so I just need to fill in all the blanks basically, right? So we take these 3 values, we plug them in. Interest then is calculated as the principal, 5,500, times the annual interest as a rate, so 0.023, again moving the decimal 2 places to the left. And then we need the months, or the years actually. We have an 18-month CD, but we want to turn that into years because our rate is an annual interest rate. Okay, so 18 months is equivalent to 18/12ths of a year. So you take the 18 and divide it by 12, and that will give you the number of years that you're actually looking at. Well, 18/12ths, of course, reduces down if you divide the top and bottom by 6. That reduces to a 3/2, and 3/2 is technically 1.5 years. Okay, well, 18 months is 1.5 year. You probably know that already, but I just simplified it mathematically. That's fine. It's 1.5. So you want 1.5 years. So we don't use 18. If you put an 18 in there, then you're looking at an 18-year period. We don't want that, right? We're looking for 18 months. Don't get ahead of yourself. You'd be looking at a lot of interest over an 18-year period. You'd be very disappointed at the end of that 1.5 years if that was how you did your calculation. So anyway, we'll go through this then. 5,500. I'm not doing that in my head. 5,500 times 0.023 times 1.5 gives me a value of $189.75. Okay, so that's the additional interest that's earned, that you would be earning over that 18-month period. Okay, so in a year and a half, you've earned almost $190 basically, or yeah, $190. Now, you may want to then figure out, because they deposit that money back into your account or give it back to you, you could withdraw all of that. So you could, at the end of the 18 months, withdraw your original $5,500 and this additional $190. And what you'll get is what's called the future value. And so you basically take the future value would be the original 5,500 plus the additional 189.75, and then they would then be giving you 56.89.75. So you basically have to add the interest back in to the principal to get the final or future value of that account after the 18-month period. Okay, so adding the interest back in on top of the principal gives you that amount. Now, generally speaking, to convert a non-year time period, you divide by the number of that unit in the year. If that's a weird way to say it, I apologize. But basically, if you're given months, if you're given n months, let's say, then you convert that by putting n over 12. If you're getting, let's say d days, then you would put d over 365, because there's 365 days in a year. If you took out a loan, let's say, to help pay for a car, but it was a short-term loan of 200 days, then you would divide the days by 365, generally speaking. But before the advent of calculators and computers, banks were allowed to use 360 instead of 365 because the calculations were easier. 360 has more factors, you can simplify fractions better with it. And so 360 was often used, and that's called the banker's rule, where legally they could do that. It ends up benefiting the bank in the long run because dividing by 360, which is a smaller number, allows this fraction to become bigger, and then when you multiply it in, the interest is larger. Now that seems like it benefits you if you're depositing money, which it does slightly, but it also benefits the bank even more when they loan the money out, okay, because they're working with bigger interest rates there. So it ends up benefiting the bank. So they were allowed to use that. Now, with new technology, 365 is not such a big deal to work with, and so most banks have switched back over to using 365, but not all of them. And sometimes some of them are still using the banker's rule of 360. Now, to get an accurate calculation, you would want to know that information. In terms of the homework, you're going to see, I think, a combination of these. If it specifies using the banker's rule or using 360 days, then do that. Do the 360. If it doesn't specify, then just assume it's 365. Okay, that's generally the case, but there are going to be some problems that specify use 360 days or use the banker's rule, in which case you want to use that. Okay. And of course, if you had W weeks, there are, of course, 52-ish weeks in a year. It's off by a day or two. I can't remember exactly, but you get about 52 weeks in a year. Okay. So just a few things, ways to convert from a different unit into years. You just take the number of that unit that you're given, divided by the number of that unit in a year, and you get the number of years.